So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very special YogUtsav, where we discuss and where we celebrate the timeless wisdom of our past. And a very hearty welcome to all the students, the teachers, and the parents of students from both the Omega International School as well as the Heartfulness Learning Center. Friends, before we start the proceedings, we have the pleasure of having two people whom most of you are very familiar with. First, I will be happy to invite Shri Madhavan to join us. Hello, Bharat, and thank you for hosting this very interesting and important event. Would you like to share a few words?
Sure, Rishabh. Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Very happy to be here with all of you. And I see more and more participants are slowly joining in. The main event, of course, is the release of the two books. I was, Raja, I was thinking about a digital detox. There's a lot of talk happening in that space. And it is more like, today's disease, in a sense. And a lot of doctors, and a lot of people are talking about what are the ways we can solve this problem. And I was thinking, we should give a book in the hands, which will not only solve this problem of digital detox, get the students into reading, and also develop that as a habit. And I was going through the Vedas book, the stories. It's a very beautiful way to convey, I would say, subtle messages in an indirect way that will reach the hearts of children. And rather than directly telling them what to do, right? This talks about how we can absorb certain values, certain principles, integrity, things like that in our lives. And I was sitting and reading it with my son, and slowly, kind of handed over that book to him, and he continued further. So it's like an enablement, simple enablement. And of course, the book on yoga. Most of us are kind of limited in our thinking with what yoga is, and mostly limited to physical exercises and breathing exercises. And this book and a few of these esoteric books really bring out the real essence of yoga on what its purpose is, and how all the steps are critical, and how these steps go further into more subtler areas. Not just dealing with the physical self, but getting into the mental, intellectual, emotional, and the spiritual self, and how to develop through tools like meditation, concentration, and things like that. These are some of the things I kind of felt were very, what I would say, apt for not just children, for all of us, to kind of come up to the latest understanding of what these timeless messages are. Really looking forward to this event, and also to having these books play a key role in our schools. Both our schools help touch the hearts and minds of all our children. Thanks, Raja. Over to you.
Thank you, Bharat Bhai. Yes, I think it is very, very important that we are able to somehow anchor ourselves with this wisdom that is there in our society, in our culture, from time immemorial. And I think it is a small endeavor on the part of Heartfulness to be able to bring this in repackaged in a way that it is more easy to digest. And especially a book like the Tales from the Vedas and the Upanishads are a very important tool to not only introduce our present generation to this timeless wisdom, but also to be able to help them appreciate things which has been there, but we may not have been able to bring it to our attention in the present form. I'm also very happy to invite Shri Ramakrishna Malela, who is also joining us here today. He is involved with, of course, the Heartfulness Education Trust, as well as the Heartfulness Learning Center. Hello, Ramki Bhai, and thank you for joining us today and hosting this event for all your teachers and the parents of all the students, and of course, our students themselves. So would you like to say something on this occasion?
Thank you, Brother Raja, and good evening to all participants. The word authentic, it's a very wonderful word actually. And the audacity of the book writer who wrote that authenticity, it itself is very powerful. Today morning itself, I had a call with the principal of a school in Pune. This school is actually conducting classes on Ashtanga Yoga to students. And I'm very happy on the same lines that at Heartfulness Learning Center, and of course, even at LMOS and across India and other countries, we are right now conducting Gitopdesh in a very methodical manner with a proper curriculum, with a pedagogical approach. Almost a 6 months course on Gita. We are launching a course on Ashtanga Yoga in this summer, and there is going to be a Gita workbook for students. So very happy and grateful for this opportunity to be a part of this series where the word Veda by itself, to know, and Upanishad, to sit with somebody and learn. And what Bharat just now alluded to, that it's time that parents, especially parents, sit along with our own children and read these books, and the manner in which a story has an effect. I'm also right now studying, Raja, just to share and conclude, I'm studying my master's in education from Tata Institute of Social Science. There's a separate research on storytelling and its effect on cognitive skill development. So that way, any book, any good book, has effect on how do we imagine the character. So thereby, I'm very happy to be a part of this event where these two wonderful books are very handy to children and their families, and of course to schools as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramki Bhai, for that note. And of course, we will be talking more and more about both the books and how they are important and the reason why we are launching and publishing these two books. But before that, I would like to call upon a recording that we had a little earlier in the day. We were supposed to be joined by Shri Ram Madhav ji live right now, but he had some urgent flight to catch. I think his later flight got cancelled. And so we had to record a conversation with him just a couple of hours back. And not only has he conveyed his best wishes for this event, but we had a very, very insightful conversation. So I'll request if that can be played first, and then we can discuss the various aspects that he discussed during that conversation. So if we can have that on the screen, the conversation that we had with Ram Madhav ji. So good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to YogUtsav, which is nothing but experiencing the real essence of the timeless wisdom of India's ancient texts. And we are privileged today to have someone of the stature of Sri Ram Madhav ji, who is not only an Indian politician, but a prolific author and also a great thinker. Madhavji does not need any introduction. Most of us are familiar with his previous activities, such as the General Secretary of the BJP, the member of the Governing Council of the India Foundation, and of course, as a member of the National Executive of the RSS. Madhavji is a renowned author and thinker and has more than 200 publications to his credit. He has also authored several books in English and Telugu, the most recent one being The Hindutva Paradigm, Integral Humanism and the Quest for Non-Western Worldview. He's also authored books like Uneasy Neighbors, India and China After 50 Years of War, and Because India Comes First, Reflections on Nationalism, Identity and Culture. He's a regular contributor on platforms like the Indian Express, Hindustan Times, and the Open Magazine, amongst others. He's also been the editor of the Bharatiya Pragna, a monthly magazine in English, published by Pragna Bharati, and associated editor with Jagrati, a Telugu weekly. So thank you, Madhavji, for joining us today. A very hearty welcome to you. We know you are extremely hard pressed for time, and we're really grateful to you for joining us. Sir, you have, of course, been a prolific writer. Your latest book is about the various concepts of what Indianness and what Hindutva and what our culture is all about. And it's very interesting that today we are discussing two very important books which are related or tied to our ancient culture. Of course, the first one being Authentic Yoga by P.Y. Deshpandeji, and which basically gives us insight onto the various aspects of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and of course the other being Tales from the Vedas and Upanishads, which is, although it is meant for children, it's an illustrated book. But today I think the importance and the value of this publication is for everyone who needs an introduction or a easy read on the Vedas and the Upanishads. So you have been involved with these subjects for such a long time. Could you share your views on how you think we can bring these timeless wisdoms back to our generation?
Thank you, Rishabhji, and thank you especially for inviting me to be a part of this very important program of YogUtsav, celebrating the great ancient wisdom of our country through its ancient literature, our texts, our great epics and all. You are all involved in the area of education. Education is understood today as the means for developing knowledge. We are creating a world of knowledgeable people. But in India, education is understood not merely an instrument for acquiring knowledge, but its ultimate aim should be to make people wise, spread wisdom. The word wisdom that you used in your introduction is essentially the Indian idea of education. The goddess of education in India, Ma Saraswati, you see her picture every time it comes with a statement, Sa Vidya Ya Vimuktaye, meaning the goddess Saraswati, who is the goddess of learning, we call it, or goddess of education, we call it. In Indian context, that education is about vimukti, that is about liberation. It's not just about acquiring knowledge. It's about acquiring a higher level of consciousness, which is very liberating, which for want of any better English word, we can use the word wisdom. So here the whole effort is towards making people acquire wisdom. Wisdom can be acquired not through mere conventional educational system. Conventional educational system will make one knowledgeable, but through knowledge, one can become arrogant. One can become a sort of, one can be filled with a sort of superiority complex. But wisdom is what should be the ultimate objective of any learning. And wisdom can be acquired through means of reaching or accessing the ancient Indian texts, Indian literature, and all those things. Some of them you are also now producing. These two books that you are releasing today are actually about Indian wisdom. It's not just about Indian knowledge. It's about that wisdom. Why I'm emphasizing on the aspect of wisdom is because we are entering into a new world today. History sometimes changes very fast. We are in the fast pace of history. where we are now transmitting into a new world order, which is going to be driven heavily by knowledge. The knowledge systems, the latest knowledge system that is going to drive all of us is called artificial intelligence, a product of man's mind. But this whole new edifice that is being built up by humans is going to be a totally different edifice where humans will no longer be the controlling authority of this knowledge. The artificial intelligence as a concept will ultimately lead to a situation where machines will lead the mankind. Until now, mankind, through its knowledge, is leading using machines also as one of the instruments, one of the tools. But we are entering an era where machines will lead the mankind. That is what is artificial intelligence ultimate stage will be. Now, in such a situation where machines will start leading men, what will happen to interpersonal relations? What will happen to social institutions that we have built? What is the place of morality there? What is the place of ethics there? These are the kind of questions that are going to confront us very soon. So there you need the wisdom of millennia old experience of our civilizations like that of India, that of our neighbors. These are all very ancient civilizations. Their wisdom is going to play an important role in actually deciding about the red lines of knowledge. Knowledge in its mundane sense has certain red lines that should not be crossed. But who will decide? This wisdom has the power to decide. That is where returning to the scriptures and interpreting them to suit to the changing times, which our authors like Deshpandeji and others are doing today, or Dadaji. So that is going to be a critical link that is required for the mankind in the coming years and decades. Indian wisdom especially is more about values, fundamental values that are required for any society. And not just any given national society, I'm talking about the entire mankind, the entire creation today, or Dadaji, to sustain itself. That is going to be there in our ancient wisdom that needs to be handed down to generation after generation, more so when this generation is transforming into a new technology-driven generation. There a huge need of it, and in that sense, I really congratulate all of you who are doing this great work of going back to those scriptures, but also bringing them to the present generation in a language and in an idiom that this generation understands and appreciates them. Today, there is a big event going on in Hyderabad today. Acharya Ramanuja's massive statue has been built. In our system, statues of gods are only the forms of God. For us, God is everywhere. It's a great value, great moral, great ethical lesson that one has to learn. God is there in the form of Ramanuja, maybe some 20 miles from Hyderabad airport, but the Indian wisdom says God is everywhere. Everything is divine in our system. So this is the kind of value system that one can learn from our scriptures, from our, especially some of these tales. I am very happy that you are releasing a book with the small tales of our great spiritual masters, or, tales from their narratives in Vedas and in Upanishads and all. I tell you, one day, Sant Namdev was returning to his temple. He came back to find his guru laying down in the sanctum sanctorum of the temple with both his legs resting on the Shivlinga, the main deity of the temple. Horrified, Sant Namdev, protests with his guru. What have you done? How can you keep your feet on that sacred Shivlinga? Guru asked a simple question. All right, I needed a place to rest my feet. You are saying, that Shivlinga is sacred, so I should not put it there. Show me a place which is not sacred so that I can keep my legs there. Look at the profundity of our wisdom. When everything is divine, every aspect of this creation is divine. That is the great wisdom that we learn. So many such stories. Our literature is filled with stories of great such wisdom, such messages, such moral values. Even about Ramanuja, the statue is named as after Statue of Equality. Ramanuja one day was coming to his temple after taking sacred bath in the river Kaveri. His disciples who were following him found a woman from a so-called lower caste. There is no lower caste or upper caste in Hinduism. But those days there were the misconceptions in the society, evil practices. They found one lady cleaning the compound of the temple. They asked that lady to get away from the place so that Acharya Shri can enter the temple. That lady turns to Acharya Shri, Ramanuja. She asks a simple question. Swamiji, I was born into a caste. It's not my decision. Something happened. I was born. I was supposed to be from an untouchable caste. Now I should get away from your sight. I wanted to go. But where do I go? If I get into the river to leave my body, this body you say is impure, I want to give it up. Where do I give it up? If I give it up in the river will be polluted. If I give it up to fire will be polluted. If I give it up on this earth will be polluted. So if I have to discard this polluted body according to you, where do I leave it? That was the point of realization for Acharya Ramanuja. Thereafter, every time he went to the river for taking bath, he would keep his two hands on the shoulders of so-called Brahmin youths. While returning from the river after having the sacred bath, returning from the river to the temple, he would keep his two hands on the on the shoulders of two so-called untouchable youths. He used to say that I'm going to the river to cleanse up my body. I'm coming to the temple to cleanse my heart.
Wonderful.
These are the kind of lessons that we should teach our children. That is equality. That is the sense of divinity about the creation. I'm so happy that you are endeavoring to take these moral, fundamental, ethical values to future generations. It's a great work that you are all doing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was really a brilliant enunciation of our times, and thank you very much for whatever you've said. And it's very interesting that you mentioned artificial intelligence and where our society is going, because interestingly, I read somewhere that at one point of time, when somebody was defining evolution, that at one point of time, the brawn, it was the body which was important, and we needed to build it to be able to survive. And then we came into the era of the mind, where we were using the mind instead of to work on machines, to create something which will help us evolve. And the next era is going to be of the soul, of the spirit. And that is what is going to differentiate us from, for example, the machines that you were talking about. It is the element of empathy. It is the element of the heart, which is going to differentiate between what is going to be artificial intelligence and what is all within us. And so, interestingly, this whole edifice that we are creating around teaching people our ancient timeless wisdom, the entire process is called heartfulness. It is about the heart. The practice is called heartfulness, which is nothing but a simple effort to connect people to their hearts. I think what you said was perfect. It really resonated with me, that what is it that is going to differentiate us from the machines? What is it going to differentiate us from the artificial mind? It is the heart. It is the empathy. It is the feeling. And today, when we go back to our timeless wisdom, it is us taking that wisdom and making it ours. It is us inculcating it within our hearts and into our character, into our lives. I think that interwoven aspect of this literature the interwoven aspect of this culture is what is going to take us moving ahead. And so, sir, thank you very much for bringing out this very, very important point about how do we move forward? Where is evolution taking us? And I think personally, the best way we can describe it is to connect this back to our hearts, because today perhaps we are far more advanced as a civilization in terms of technical terms, in terms of what humanity is able to achieve. But there is still so much more to achieve where, as far as the heart is concerned. So this brings me to a very important question. I was going through your book, and somewhere I came across this whole discussion on dharma, where you're quoting Justice Rama Joyce, where you said the Vedas and Upanishads were the primordial source of dharma, a compendious term for all human rights and duties, the observance of which was regarded as essential for securing peace and happiness to individuals and society. Would you kindly elucidate more on this aspect of dharma, which you have? I was going through this book of yours. You mentioned quite a few times where various aspects of dharma have been elaborated on by you.
You see, through years of deliberations, or probably centuries of deliberations, our ancients have come out with a set of values. Remember, we are a society of values. We are not a society of dry morals. Morals are imposed from the top. Values are very universal and very fundamental beliefs. Those values have been basically identified through long years of discourse, discussion, penance, and all that by our ancients. Based on those values, they have developed a social order which is called Dharma in our country. Dharma is not a rule book. Dharma is a set of values. For example, how do you look at your fellow humans? They have given certain values, certain ideals. This is how you should look at them. How do you look at remaining animate universe? The animals, the water-based animals, the animals that fly. How do you look at them? What all you eat and what all you should not eat? These are all kind of values they have prescribed to us. Similarly, about the creation, about the mind, how one can have different ideas, different thoughts, how different types of humans can live together. About all these things, they have given certain values to the society. Based on those values, each society is expected to build on its own institutions, its own political structure, its own social structure, but these values remain constant. These values are unchanging. Based on those values, suiting to your times, you build your morals also, your social order also. But values are the constant that the scriptures have taught us. Dharma is the set of values that our ancients have prescribed. That is the basis of our entire national or civilizational life in our country. But I can tell you that can become the basis for any society to build its own national life. Not necessarily copy the national life of India, but build its own national life based on these eternal values. How do you look at your women? There is a great wisdom that is taught in the form of certain values. So that value system is what we call as dharma. Dharma is not religion as we understand it. Religion is a set of certain morals. If you follow these morals, you belong to a particular religion. For example, Daji is preaching. Some people follow. That may become a religion. But then there can be multiple religions. Multiple people preaching those same values in different languages. These values are eternal and universal, but they can be articulated by different people in different ways. Those ways are all religions. Those ways are all Panths. Those ways are all sampradayas. But beneath all these, underneath all these different faith, different sampradayas, different religions, is one universal set of ideas. That is what we call as Dharma.
Thank you, sir. And interestingly, when we talk about Dharma, and there's another set of values which were taught to us by Rishi Patanjali when he talks about the Yoga Sutras, where he has described the various steps of Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 steps, of course, which culminates into Samadhi, but has Yam, Niyam, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and of course, finally Samadhi. So, we have this very ancient culture. We have the steps. We have the possibility of learning and following our lives with this set of values. We have the roadmap ready for us. How do we, in today's times, bring this? Of course, the 2 books that we are talking about today are a small effort from our side to take this essential and very valuable wisdom to the masses. But in your opinion, sir, what else can be done to raise what you mentioned earlier was the consciousness of today's man?
It is an important question to ponder over, because when India became independent in 1947, Rishi Aurobindo, one of the greatest saints of our country, sages of our country, had very categorically stated that India's liberation was not just for itself. India is being liberated today in order for it to be able to liberate the entire mankind. So when he talked about liberating the entire mankind, he was not talking in terms of any political liberation. Right. He was talking in terms of carrying its great noble wisdom enshrined in its literature, its scriptures, its books, its knowledge systems, like Patanjali's Yoga Shastra, our Ayurveda, and other knowledge systems, Indic knowledge systems. This needs to be taken to the entire humanity. Entire mankind should be benefited out of it. And ultimately, we should reach a stage, according to Aurobindo, we should reach a stage where you don't look for Swarga elsewhere, heaven elsewhere, or moksha elsewhere. You should be able to transform this creation, this universe. You should be able to take it to a higher level, so that it itself becomes a superhuman or a super universe. You create superhumans here. So that effort has to happen from India. That is the mission for which India is surviving. Every nation has a mission to accomplish, and India's mission is this universal uplift, universal spiritualization. That is India's mission. So that means India has to champion it. You and me, the systems here, the government here, people here have to champion it in a big way today. And especially when, again, I'm sorry, I'm returning to that old point that I had made, when the world is entering into an artificial intelligence era. You are going into an era which is artificial. And you are thinking that is going to be your future. And you talked about heartfulness. You know that today the machines are more intelligent than human brains. There is something called machine learning today. Machine learning means the machines will be taught. Taught by whom? Taught by our software engineers. Means human brains will train the machines. But once trained, machines today no longer depend on human brain. And may I tell you, the trained machines are million times more capable in intelligence than the existing human brains. Google has developed a new chess application, artificial intelligence driven chess player. That chess application is so damn intelligent that Garry Kasparov, the world's one of the topmost chess players, could not even comprehend the moves that it was making. We had a chess game on internet, but all the moves were fed by humans. But here is an artificial intelligence brain, meaning a brain which is more powerful than a human brain. Do you celebrate it? Don't, because it has the brain, it doesn't have the heart.
Correct.
Many moves it makes. It ready to sacrifice most important pawns. It is ready to sacrifice because it knows what will happen in the end. No sensible player will sacrifice those important pawns. Now, juxtapose it to a war. In a war, you are fighting with another country. If it is artificial intelligence driven war, the machine will say, okay, sacrifice 50,000 soldiers, India will win the war. Any general will do that? Because that is where heartfulness comes into picture. You need heartfulness. That is what Dharma. That is what is the essence of our spirituality. You cannot be driven merely by certain mundane objectives. There is something more beyond your mundane objectives. That more can be understood through your heart. The entire Indian literature, entire Indian knowledge systems, entire Indian wisdom is appealing to heart. So we need to champion it. Problem is, we are running after the other ideas. Maybe they have a place. I am not denigrating any idea. Every idea has its place. But our ideas are more profound, more universal, more essential for the transforming world order today. There, India has to champion. The question that you are asking, how to do it, we have to do it. Nobody else is going to do it. We all have to do it. In that, you should do it. We should do it. Together, as a government also, we should do it. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thank you. And in fact, while you were saying, as they define yoga as something is yoga is union of us with the divine. I think today another aspect of yoga is the union of our mind and our hearts. Unless we are able to unite this great faculty of the mind that we have and use our hearts to regulate it, we are going to have fantastic humans, very smart humans. But again, as you said, the intelligence is artificial and there is no heart. So I think this is a wonderful suggestion, a wonderful thing that you just told us, and really hope what we are doing, and I know you through your books, through your lectures, through your articles, you have been also propounding the same theory on similar lines of taking India, making us realize that the entire timeless wisdom that is there for us to not only articulate, but also to imbibe and inculcate within our lives. I can see that happening with all your articles, all your books, where you are able to bring very ancient concepts in a much more easy form. And that is what Daji has been attempting with these two books. So thank you, sir, for joining us in this very small and humble effort on our part. And we are confident that with the efforts of Daji and all the saints of this world and of all the people like you who are working on this and making an effort to make this change, as Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. So I think the change begins with us. Working on the heart begins with us. And I think that is the essential part of whatever we are trying to achieve. We may all try different ways to do it, but eventually all roads will hopefully lead to Rome, and we will be able to go and reach where we want. So thank you, sir, for all your time today afternoon, and we wish you all the best in all that you are doing, and we look forward to this continued partnership with you to be able to bring this message of the heart to one and all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Rishabhji. I enjoyed the conversation.
So friends, that was Shri Ram Madhav ji, who shared his huge experience, huge knowledge with us. He could answer questions. But very interestingly, we have a very important person, someone who has been an integral part of the development of both these books. It is my pleasure and honor to invite Sister Purnima Ramakrishnan and ask her some questions and get her insights on both these books. Thank you, Sister Purnima, for joining us today, and welcome to this event.
Thank you so much, Rishabhji. It's so joyful the way you welcomed me, and it made my heart, so happy. Thank you so much. these two books have been such a pleasure, such a delight to read, to work with, and to read again and again and again. And there is this very interesting thing in this book, especially the Authentic Yoga book, where Daji has written this beautiful introduction and conclusion. And I'm not a yoga aficionado, let me be very honest. And I am also a sort of person who needs to be pushed and pulled to accomplish or even do things. And in this scenario, asking me to read this book or something is quite a challenge. But when I read this introduction and conclusion by Daji, I was like floored, and then that made me actually want to read the whole book. I will just tell you one sentence which I wanted to, which made me read, in fact, all the literature from the Heartfulness once again. The practical approach of unraveling the sutras through meditation involves direct experience and perception, so that the true meaning of the sutras unfolds as a result of pure seeing. So Daji says this in his conclusion, the Yoga Sutras in the Light of Heartfulness. So, not only is this line very poignant to me, because, when you read about yoga, or even when you do yoga, or when you talk about yogic states, when you talk about the sutras, as a common man born or a common woman born in this century and, having this lifestyle, what really strikes us is how is it relevant to me? And when you actually meditate and you experience this yogic states, the sutras reveal itself. And then when you've read all these commentaries and explanations, slowly things starts making sense. So I don't think it's one reading which is required, or one reading which is sufficient. I think it's a long journey in itself. And when you asked me about this book, the Tales from the Vedas and Upanishads, that's also a complete delight. And not only has Daji written his commentary about each of the stories from the Vedas, it's like he's really touched the hearts of children in a very unique, beautiful way. For example, in the second story, he says, as his conclusion, some of you may have watched movies like Marvel's Endgame or read books about time travel. Characters arrive in the past or the future, meet their young selves or older selves. They prevent a disaster, initiate an evolutionary change, and then go back to witness the effect of their change. So when, we had a group of children talk about these books, talk about these stories, this was what they quoted. They said, I have watched Marvel's Endgame. Doctor Strange has this time stone and he does all these beautiful things. He goes back in time, comes forward in time. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't think of that. And then I asked, okay, what do you want to do? So he said, this boy from one of these schools, people from Amazon have joined us. They were also witness to this beautiful conversation. So when I asked, what do you want to do? He said, this young boy from grade 8, he said, I want to go ahead in time to the future, and I want to know how to get better marks, come back and do well in my math exam. And I was like, yes, that's what this book is all about. Be the best version of yourself. And in fact, the second story is all about be the best version of yourself. How do you become that bird in the topmost branch who is the best version of himself? So these books, the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Authentic Yoga, it's definitely, ancient timeless wisdom, but how is it really relevant to people, adults like me, or children like, in the schools which we are promoting the book? How is it really relevant? Because it directly speaks to us. It directly speaks to me as an adult when I have to, use these yogic states or yogic sutras, and it directly speaks to the children in the schools. So for me, these are very special. And thank you so much, Rishabhji, for asking my opinion.
No, I think thanks is in order to you for helping us in bringing these books, these really valuable treasure troves, to be, presented to one and all in a very, very palatable form. And especially the book Tales from the Vedas and the Upanishads, because this is something which is, I think, so beautifully presented. And although I know we initially were looking at children reading it, but even if someone who's not a child reads it, It's such a pleasure to be able to get these insights on these stories, the values behind it, the thought process behind it. But that leads me to a question. There's so many stories. Do you have any favorites from them?
Yeah, my favorite is story number 2. Story number 2 sort of is like
Don't say too much about it. We want everyone to pick up the book.
spoken like a true businessman. So story number 2, I'm not going to tell the story. I'm just going to tell the name of the story, The Dazzling Bird on the Tree. And this is exactly the story which is going to talk about, talk about how to be the best version of yourself. You can get Doctor Strange's time stone, and you can go back and forward in time, and try to find your solutions to whatever challenges you are facing and become the best version of yourself. That's my favorite story.
Well, that's a wonderful thought to become the best version of yourself, which is also what the other book is all about. I think it's a very handy tool to navigate the entire process of what we know as Raj Yoga or Ashtang Yoga, and how beautifully Deshpande ji describes the entire process. And I think once we imbibe the wisdom and the idea behind it, practicing it becomes very, very natural to us. So I think it's wonderful that we are able to present these two beautiful books to this audience. And I'm sure there are people in the audience who would like to ask you questions about this book. But before we take it up, there is one question in the chat box where Preeti ji is asking that even though we have a treasure of timeless wisdom in our ancient literature, yet after 7 decades of freedom, we could not make it a part of education system. What could we do now to bring about that change? Would you care to answer?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Preeti ji. So, when the book was launched by Mr. Ramesh ji, he said there is a huge market for Gyan. It's just that we are not able to provide it. So, after 10 decades of freedom, we could not make it a part of our education system. What could we do now to bring about that change? It's exactly in your hands, Preeti ji. And the very reason this has also become a fruition, that we brought together 2 wonderful schools here on this event, where there is a possibility that these timeless wisdom becomes a part of children's curriculum. And if 1 or 2 schools are able to start it, 1 or 2 schools are coming together and talking about it, and I think there is a huge change which is going to come, and we are going to learn more from it. Also, there has not been much initiative in actually trying to talk about these ancient wisdom in situations which are relevant to us. Like I said, when you talk about the authentic yoga book, when I can actually experience the yogic states in a meditation, and when I, as a person, can feel what Deshpande ji has written, whatever he has written is more appealing to me, more understandable to me. That is one example I would like to show. I would indicate. Another example is when you just, I have this great volume of Upanishads. Okay, there are eight texts, 8 volumes of it. In fact, like each one is fat like this. And if this is something I present to my son, who is 16-year-old and who is just, there playing with his friends, do you think he's just going to read that? I mean, it's just translated from Sanskrit, because I don't know Sanskrit. At least I got the English version. So if that's something, how is it relevant to him? He would wonder. And the reason we've not been able to really integrate it into our education system is because the generation is just drastically changing. Today, one generation is not 10 or 20 years. It's just 5 or 7 years is just one different generation. And when you have a generation shift, which is so young, so soon, so how can we talk about things which are not relevant to them? And this book has been an effort to bring these stories into a more relevant and more palatable and more interesting way for children. And when children themselves try to share their joy and try to imbibe the wisdom, I think the education system will also slowly change, and also the teachers and functionaries of the school are part of this conversation, and let's be the change, like Rishabh said, be the change you want to see, and you're having exactly that role. And I'm sure, thank you so much for making this effort of change.
Thank you, Purnima sister. Sorry. Thank you very much.
And in fact, we actually have two of these change makers on this call, both Brother Bharat as well as Brother Ramkrishna, who are making their effort on these lines in their schools. I'll invite them to chip in if they have something to add to what Purnima just said.
Yes, and I think this is the first important culture we should build at home, Preetiji, is to allow questions to come. This is a very good thing. It's not about the answer that we will tell. It is this questioning ability is what I was very triggered when you said. And yours is the only question that was there in the chat box. With that as the appreciation, inquiry-based learning, which John Dewey speaks in the whole basis of American educational revolution, is actually something which is coming from ancient Indian wisdom, as Lord Krishna talks about in chapter 4, Tad Vidhi Pranipatena Pariprasnena Sevaya. Now, since you said education system, if you look at what happened in the last 100 years after the colonial rule and the political takeover from 2005 of NCF till NEP 2020. Now, if you detail it out of what NEP is talking about, there is a clear mention to have values education as a part of our education. On the same note, I'm happy to share that Heartfulness Education Trust has an exclusive values education curriculum based on United Nations UNESCO's core 9 values that have been proposed as a part of the 2002 study from International Commission of Education on the 4 pillars of education. These 9 values have been taken as an important aspect of our education. A research team has put together 25 lesson plans, and most importantly, a spiral curriculum is designed. Now, Jerome Bruner, who is actually the one who designed spiral curriculum, thanks to the American research that they did. And I think so I would appeal that, when we take this kind of values education and we have a course from 1st class to 9th class, and in THLC, especially, we teach this as a part of the school curriculum. And across India, I'm happy to share that there are close to 550 schools who are using this curriculum as an exclusive subject or integrated with classroom studies. So I believe, long story short, we do this teachers training program, which Heartfulness Education Trust does, and bring in this element of how do we bake this into the mainstream education. NEP clearly makes a provision. So I'm hoping that more and more schools will take the advantage of NEP 2020. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Ramakrishna, for giving us an insider's view to this whole idea, and more power to you and Brother Bharat and everyone involved in making this change. I know we are running kind of against time. We're almost almost close to an hour. But we definitely have one question I would definitely want to take up. Is Ganga Raghavan on the panel? Can she ask her question? Sister, you need to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Ganga. Yeah, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yes.
So good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'm Ganga Raghavan, and I teach a theory of knowledge to IBDP students. And they are supposed to write an essay on one of the 6 topics that IB gives out every year. So one of the topics was what is written in the chat box. That's how do historians and human scientists give knowledge meaning through the telling of stories. And this was one of the favorite topic, or you can say it is given in the form of a knowledge question, an open-ended question. So this was one of the favorite questions that most of the students took up. So this is a question to everybody. Like, Daji used the same thing to give knowledge meaning. Like, usually we think that we learn. There are different learning styles like visual, auditory, kinesthetic, etc., etc. So recently, education they are kind of discovering that it's not through these means that we learn. We learn when we find there is a meaning to knowledge. That means if we find knowledge has some meaning to us, then we learn better. So what would you like? What would you say what Daji has done in this book?
Well, I think this question is addressed to the ace storyteller we have with us, Purnima Ben. So request her to take this up.
Sometimes Raja Bhaiya is quite naughty, but he's our dear brother. So, your question implies that storytelling is part of what historians do, right? So you are actually implying that they use the medium of storytelling, and probably your question is, why do they do it, or how are they successful? I'm going to go back to one of the stories, not from this Upanishads collection, but in the Ramayana, when Rama and Sita are in the forest. Sage Atri's wife, Anasuya, is telling this story to Sita ji that, how Anasuya herself could outwit the three deities of Hinduism, like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, by her creativity, by her ingenuity, by her, lateral thinking. So that is another story which happened. And Anasuya ji tells this story to Sita ji, and she tells her, keep faith, keep optimism, this too shall pass, and you will soon be back, in the comfort of your kingdom. So this story, it was actually told by Anasuya to Sita ji. Imagine the art of storytelling is so ancient, and probably this gave a lot of strength to Sita ji when she was in the Ashoka Van in Lanka when Ravana kidnapped her. Another example I would like to give you is, when the Pandavas and Draupadi were in the forest, one of the sages who visited them told them the story of Nala and Damayanti. And this is another story inside a story, okay? And how Nala and Damayanti won their kingdom back because of their, again, patience, faith, determination, all these qualities. So this story probably gave them a lot of hope, optimism that they too might, see a better future. So the art of storytelling is very powerful. Of course, there is no doubt about it. And you yourself told us how it's recognized as another form of imparting knowledge. And why and how is something, it's embedded in our psyche. I am not just Purnima. Rishabji is not just Rishabji. Ganga Raghavan is not just Ganga Raghavan. I think of myself as my narrative. Purnima is this person who is married to this person, and she has this son, and she lives here in Chennai. It's a story. I am my narrative, right? And Rishabji is another narrative to himself. He is another narrative to me. He is my friend. He is my brother. We've known each other for so many years, and we support each other. Madam Ganga Raghavan is this teacher, and I've seen her so many times walking in the Ashram Avenue. We say hello to each other. So this is actually a narrative. Storytelling is a narrative which slowly gives an emotional resilience to our psyche as a human being. So when you can actually see, it's the same thing which Daji said in this authentic yoga book. He said, when you actually meditate, you understand the yogic states better. So when you actually just talk about knowledge, it makes no meaning because you have not experienced it. But a story is an experience because you go into the story and you experience the story. When I just tell you, oh, Rama and Sita were in the forest, immediately you think of Rama with his orange robes or Sita wearing a sari. You actually go there and experience everything. You visualize the story, and a visualization is the visualization of the story is a narrative. It's an experience. It's an experience inside your mind. Experience just doesn't mean the physical experience of touch, all these five senses. Experience is also an experience of the mind. So, that's my answer. And also, my brother Ramakrishna Malila is adding on. In fact, historians have an important role in being an effective storyteller to talk about the best aspects of each civilization. So if you want to add on to it, that would be amazing.
Yeah, and I think, again, I appreciate question. It puts us to a very learning mode. So Gangaji, very good question. And when we talk about historians also need an authentic information about the past. And so I'm happy, I'm actually also reading the same book that you're talking about, the IB TOK. It's fantastic, actually. So I think I've delayed learning. I'm learning too late, but it's important now that I'm in the school, I have to learn. So to your point, ma'am, the idea of being a storyteller releases the clutches that something in the history is only about a certain religion or a caste or a wrong information that is told. But if a historian talks about what happened to the Mesopotamian civilization and today, how is it in the current state of Iran, Iraq, and those regions? If you talk about Harappa and Mohenjo-daro and currently why Afghan and those regions, what happened to Indus civilization and today, how it is related? How is the Mayan civilization and what did that they contribute, whether it is Atlantic civilization? So the historian's way of telling a story actually is more relevant to these kind of books. So thanks for bringing a very good question. Over to you, Raja.
And also, all remember, right? Shivaji's mother used to tell him a lot of stories about the great heroes of India, and that gave him a lot of courage, lot of strength and determination. And in the current times, why are we so hooked to superheroes, superhero movies, superhero T-shirts, superhero whatever? We are hooked to superheroes because it's the story. That story has a hero, and that story has a optimism which is generated, and you are hooked to the optimism, and I am hooked to the optimism. So I love to wear a superhero T-shirt, right? Because stories are essentially trying to give us that sense of becoming the best version of myself. It gives me the possibility that if somebody is able to become a best version, I can do that too. So that's something I've always felt when I watch a story. It has to be when I watch a movie, it has to be the best. It has to give me the best. Or when I read the story, it has to give me the best. So that's something I want to also add. Thanks. Over to Rishabh-ji.
Well, thank you very much. I think with this conversation is really interesting and we can go on and on, but we have to be mindful of the time. But another way of taking this conversation forward is to perhaps pick up these two books and actually go through them and imbibe them. They are both treasure troves in their own ways. So it is my earnest request to everyone, if you have not picked up a copy, please do so. These two are like essential companions for us, which will give us not only an introduction to our ancient wisdom, but will also help us move forward in life. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you Omega School. Thank you THLC for facilitating this conversation. And of course, thank you Purnima for not only bringing this book to us, but also giving us all these wonderful insights, both about these books as well as the thought process behind them. We're grateful to everyone for giving us this time and this opportunity. And we do hope that when you actually pick up the book, you will perceive the value with which these have been produced. So a very happy and pleasant weekend to everyone. And the best way to spend this weekend I would urge is to pick up the books and read them at your leisure. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.